Welcome to my channel. My name is Johanna. This is Rainierbooks. I'm a German in Sweden talking about books in English. So today it's time for another weekly wrap-up. I'm going to talk about the books that I'm currently reading, that I'm planning to read next week, and that I did not finish, and something more. And I do the e-tag today within this wrap-up. So let's get started. Midsummer is lying behind us. Midsummer is the greatest party, the greatest celebration in Sweden, and it was last Friday. And it was pretty calm from my part because I don't own a boat, I don't own a house in the countryside, and I don't have a large family. I was reading a little bit, but let me speak about two books that I actually did not finish. I want to start with them, and that I will bring back to the library. This is London Burning by Anthony Quinn. It's a book about four different people in London of 1979, in the year Margaret Thatcher gets elected as the new Prime Minister, and she's going to change the whole country. And the country's on the brink of poverty for a lot of people, and on the brink of change. And I just couldn't get involved with the characters that Anthony Quinn is introducing, so I DNF'd it after 50 pages. I was quite strict DNFing last week because I also DNF'd Hot Stew by Fiona Mozley. Fiona Mozley's newest novel. It's her second novel. Her first novel was nominated. I think it was longlisted. It was actually shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Was longlisted for the Women's Prize. It was longlisted for the Dublin Literary Award. This is her second one, Hot Stew, which is about Soho in London, which I thought was very interesting. But then the story wasn't, the main lines of the plot weren't so interesting to me. This is about a couple of people who are living in Soho, working and living around a brothel, and there's a developer who is a woman who's trying to just sort of chase them out of their premises. Something that happens probably very often in London, and that I'm actually interested in. Basically, the gentrification of the city that has been going on for decades, but I didn't like the way it was narrated, so I DNF'd it too. So the library will be happy because tomorrow or on Wednesday I will bring these two books back. Hot Stew by Fiona Mozley and London Burning by Anthony Quinn. Tell me down below if you have read these books and if you like them, and if I have made a mistake by DNFing them. But three books I'm reading, and I will continue to read them. We start with the Swedish one, which is, as I told you last week, it is by Johanna Bäckström. Lerneby is a journalist who wrote Familjen, about a family, a large family originating from Lebanon, who is the sort of leading family in Angeret, in Gothenburg. And Johanna Bäckström Lerneby has had the opportunity to interview the, in Italian we would call him il padrino, the man who is sort of the head of the family. And he was very nice to her, but they had very different opinions about how things should go. And this is a very interesting book because we have this problem of, as we call it in German, a clan-related crime, especially in Germany and in Sweden, I guess, because both countries share the history that large groups from Lebanon came into Sweden and Germany in the early 1980s, middle of the 1980s, when there was a civil war in Lebanon, and we didn't treat these people very well, and we didn't give them, like in Germany, working permits, so they created their own sort of parallel society, and they also brought their own parallel society with them, and this has caused a lot of problems. And there are a lot of connections between those families, those large families actually, between Germany and Sweden. This is very interesting and very special. Familjen by Johanna Bäckström Lerneby. The second book that I am reading, and I'm halfway through it now, are the short stories by Haruki Murakami, the Japanese author. His newest book in English is called First Person Singular. 8 stories of him. I have read 4 so far, And as always, Murakami deals a lot with music. You can already see that in the titles. So these stories are called Cream, On a Stone Pillow, Charlie Parker Plays Bossa Nova, and With the Beatles. And I'm now in the middle of the story Confessions of a Shinagawa Monkey. And all the persons or the stories are narrated in the first person singular. That's why the book is called First Person Singular. And some of them, the first three of them at least, are being told by men who are in the middle or towards the end of their lives, and they are reminiscing something that happened in their adolescence. Like the narrator of Cream is thinking about a strange event when he was like 16, 17. A girl of his class, I think, high school class, invited him to a concert where she was supposed to play the piano, and this boy takes a bus up on a hill, and from the bus stop he has to walk several hundreds of meters to the concert hall. The concert hall looks pretty closed, and it is closed actually, no one is there. And the boy wanders around the concert hall a little bit, is about his way back to the bus stop to go back to town, to Kobe, and suddenly sees that there's an old man sitting on a bench, and he starts talking with that old man, and they start a philosophical discussion. This is so typical Murakami as it can get, I think, and I like the tone of these these stories that have a lot of melancholy about it, about the disappearance of youth and adolescence, and some moments that people have sort of preserved for them, like also in the second story, in the third story with the Beatles, the narrator is thinking back to a time when he had when he saw a girl in school with the Beatles LP with the Beatles under her arm, and he has sort of this sort of image has been almost planted into his brain for decades later, and this is very fascinating, and what Murakami is developing with his meditations about music, about love, about adolescence, about aging. As always, a great read, Haruki Murakami, first person singular. The third book that I've started to read yesterday very slowly, but I'm speed up a little bit, hopefully this week, is, I think it's on a short list of the Women's Prize for this year. This is Cherie Jones, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. This is playing in the Caribbean, and it starts in the 1970s and 1980s. And it's about it seems to be about the growing up of a girl named Lala, who grows up with her grandmother in Baxter's Beach in Barbados. And I'm just gonna see what happens. These three books I'm reading currently, and I think now, actually, it's time for the e-tag. The e-tag was developed originally by Jim from Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. He's doing the whole alphabet, and luckily he's not doing the Chinese alphabet, but he's doing the Latin alphabet, so we get 26 letters from him, probably. I wonder everybody's asking themselves what he's going to do with Q and Y, for example. But now we're doing E, and here's my take on the e-tag. First question is, E is for elephant. What is the biggest book you have read this year? I guess you mean the book with most pages. Actually, the biggest book that I've read so far this year is Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, a non-fiction book, but there's a big but. No, that's not a big but. And there's a big but behind it, and this is that I have to say that I think 90 pages of the book at least are annotations and footnotes, and I haven't read these footnotes. I never read footnotes, but Isabel Wilkerson's book Cast should be the longest book that I've read so far this year, the biggest book. E is also for English. Yes, it is. Who do you consider the greatest English novelist? This is a question I haven't decided an answer to yet. There are so many, of course. And D.H. Lawrence, E.M. Forster. I read Forster earlier this year, A Passage to India, great novel. He had such great potential. D.H. Lawrence, of course, have to read more of him, and I actually want to read more of him. Graham Greene is always named as one of the great British romanciers. Doris Lessing. There are quite a bunch of them. If English is not your first language, what was the first book you read in English? The first book I think I read in English was in school, of course, because it was like in 7th or 8th grade. We read, for 2 years almost, we read Graham Greene's novel The Third Man with Rollo Martin. I will never forget him. And I also saw the movie, of course, by and with Orson Welles. That was the first book. E is for Elantris. What is your favorite book or series by Brandon Sanderson? I have never read Brandon Sanderson. I know who he is. I know that he has written a bunch of big books, but I never read anything by him, and I don't know if I ever will. So I pass. E is for ebooks. Do you prefer physical books or ebooks? I read both, and I prefer physical books, definitely. There's something special to it, to touch a book, to see the cover, to smell it, even if it's older. This one is very new, so I'm the first one probably reading Murakami's book. This is something special, and an ebook always has a lot of things that I don't like about it are that they don't have a cover, they are in the same sort of box, they always have the same type of script. Which is an advantage as well, because I can make it bigger, especially when you get older. That's to increase the font is a good thing. And you can also mark text passages, which I think is great. But all in all, I would always go for a physical hardback book to touch. E is for exploration. What is your favorite travel book? I think we have to divide this answer into 2 parts. One is the travel that you're doing, when you buy a travel book, because you know you're going to a certain place, to a certain country, to a certain region, and you're going to use it. That would be my Portland travel guide that I had when I first went to Portland 2017, or any other book. But then the travel book as a literary genre that was actually, I think, developed by fellow Germans in the 18th and 19th century by great people like Georg Foster and Alexander von Humboldt, and where people are traveling to, I would go for Kapuscinski, an old favorite of mine that I have mentioned before on this channel, the Polish author Ryszard Kapuscinski, which is not a travel author. He was never a travel author, but he has definitely shown us places, countries in the world, like Iran or Russia, that we couldn't see for ourselves, and has given us his interpretation of them. E is for Lean. If you have grandkids, kids, pets, etc., beginning with the letters E, and you want to show them, this is your opportunity. I have no grandkids. I have kids, but they're not beginning with the letter E, and even my pets didn't start with the letter E. E is for elf. What is your favorite fantasy creature? I'm not the great reader of fantasy and science fiction and magical realism, so I have always problems with questions like that. So my favorite fantasy figure would be probably from some of the fairy tales of the brothers Grimm. Rumpelstilzchen was kind of an interesting fantasy creature. I should read more Japanese stuff, more manga, and I probably will do so in the future. But I go now for Rumpelstilzchen. What is Rumpelstilzchen called in English? Rumpelstiltskin. E is for extraterrestrial. Here we go again. What is your favorite book about another world, or your favorite planet, real or fictitious? Another planet. I at an earlier attack, I told you that I am I have looked at TV shows, and I have looked at movies, sci-fi movies and fantasy movies and stuff like that. So I like this world. I like it really a lot. So I would go for our world here, the real world. The Earth is my favorite planet. The last prompt here is E is for Exodus. Exodus, movement of the people. What is the most interesting book you have read about an Exodus? I'm pretty sure that a long time ago, I read a novel called Exodus by Leon Uris, an American author. It was published in 1958. This is even a movie, I think 2 years later, with Paul Newman, directed by Otto Preminger. Preminger, who directed one of my absolute favorite movies, River of No Return, starring Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe. And Exodus tells the story of the people of Israel, a bunch of people who, after the Second World War, started out on a ship called Exodus to Israel. So this is a novel that I read about Exodus. But when I think of Exodus, the first thing that comes to my mind is this Bob Marley song, Exodus, Movement of the People. Basically, Exodus is the founding myth of Israel. And when the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, it tells the story of the departure of the Israeli people from Egypt and their movement as a people towards the land of Canaan, in the wilderness to the borders. And the message is that the Israelites were delivered from slavery by Yahweh, their God, and therefore belong to him by covenant. And that's also the story that Bob Marley tells and sings in his song. Modern scholars have very much doubts of this founding myth and say that this hasn't happened like that. They believe that there are some historical basic facts on it, but they have too little material to prove this story. And Exodus is a story in the Bible. And Exodus is also the novel by Leon Uris, which I have at least partially read many years ago, by Leon Uris, and the movie by Paul Newman. So I haven't been very active in reading Exodus literature. But of course it's a very important myth of the history of people, of humankind. And that was the E-tag, actually. That was the last tag on E, the last prompt on E. And that was also the weekly wrap-up. The week is over. The European Championships in football go on tomorrow with a classic match between England and Germany at Wembley in London. I once was in Wembley at London in 2012. 2012 I saw the semi-final of the Olympic tournament in the women's soccer competition between Japan and France at Wembley, and there were 66,000 people attending this, and that was a great experience to be at Wembley. I came back to Wembley and I saw England men against San Marino a couple of years later. I won't be there tomorrow, but I will watch the game, and I hope that you cross your fingers for the right team. That means for Germany, of course. But this year we don't have a team that can go all the way, like in 2014, when the German team played pure magic in the quarterfinals against Brazil and won by 7-1. That was really the best team in the world at the time that we had. Things have happened since then, and I think this team is very vulnerable. So let's see who wins the European Championship. Who's your favorite? Who is going to win? Leave me a comment down below. See you soon. Bye-bye.